Welcome to Fred the Show on a week that we are looking now back 1 year later at Helene and its incredible impact on the upstate of South Carolina. Of course, we've also noted so much about what happened in western North Carolina. We will touch on all of that today. This storm was unlike really anything we'd ever seen. 50 deaths have been blamed on the storm just in the state of South Carolina alone. A wind gust of 77 miles per hour in Lawrence County. Parts of Greenville County got up to 21 inches of rain, and what's been called by a lot of people, really it was the upstate's Hugo, that kind of damage. We have two gentlemen joining us today that know all too well what happened just about a year ago. Doug Bryson is here. He's the Spartanburg County Emergency Services Director. Great to have him here. Ryan Mosier, we talk to him all the time. He is from Duke Energy. Gentlemen, first of all, thank you for being with me today.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Can you believe it's been a year?
No.
Is it something that it in some ways is kind of still going on? Is there still Helene issues that you're both dealing with?
Well, I can speak for Duke Energy. It was the most significant event that our team had ever experienced in the upstate. Logistics, the damage, the just sheer number of folks that were without power, and the duration, the length of time that they were without power. We had 99% of our customers out in Spartanburg, Greenville, Greenwood, Anderson, Oconee County. So it was a really dramatic event for us as a team, as a response organization, but also for our customers. And over the past year, we've incorporated a lot of lessons learned from our response and from our community partners like Spartanburg County, and we've incorporated that into our planning for the future.
Doug, what about, is there still Helene issues that Spartanburg County is dealing with a year later?
Absolutely. Our office, Emergency Services and Emergency Management, are assisting with what we call long-term recovery. There's still people that are having housing issues, as well as debris on private property that people just aren't able to financially support hiring a contractor to come in and remove debris. So we have additional volunteer groups that we've been working with for the past year to go on private property and remove the debris.
Let me take you back a year now, and let me start with this idea. According to our 7 News meteorologists, Helene started as a low-pressure system over Central America on September 20th. At what point, and Doug, let me start with you, at what point did you get the word or get the recognition that this was going to be something extraordinary?
Well, earlier in the week, about Monday or Tuesday, and we had been in contact with the National Weather Service at GSP, as they do with the entire upstate, and then the Columbia Weather Service office with the Midlands, so on and so forth. At that point, they were predicting primarily a rain or flooding event because the original track was to take the eye wall over more towards Atlanta, which would put us on the very outer fringes on the eastern side of the storm. So we were gearing up significantly for a pretty serious flooding event, and we all know what really turned out to be more of a wind event.
Ryan, what was the realization for you that this was going to be something different?
Well, we have a team of meteorologists who track these things for us every day, and so we're certainly paying attention to it. Anytime we see tropical activity that could potentially hit the East Coast, it's on our radar. But we really knew that we were dealing with something that could be a significant event about 48 hours out. And we had already started making preparations. We had brought resources into the area, both in western North Carolina and in the upstate, to stage. But we rapidly found out come Friday midday that what we were planning for was something much more significant from what we were seeing on the ground.
What was the word that you tried to get out to your crews that would be dealing with this and trying to let them know the information that both of you knew?
Well, from a Duke Energy perspective, one of the things that, from a logistics perspective, we bring in a lot of folks who aren't necessarily familiar with the Carolinas, with the upstate, with the geography, with our systems. And so safety is our number one priority. We want to make sure everybody's out there operating as quickly but as safely as they can. The problem we found in the hours after the storm cleared was access was going to be a really significant issue for us. Trees were down everywhere. You could not find a neighborhood, you couldn't find a street that wasn't impacted by trees blocking access. And the further into the rural areas you went, the worse it got. And so we were honestly, those first couple of days, really trying to work with our community partners like Spartanburg County and other agencies in the upstate to help us get access to, so we could even figure out what it was we needed to do to make repairs in certain areas.
Doug, what were your crews facing? I've talked to a lot of first responders who went out on rescue missions early, and one of the things that they had, and Ryan just brought it up, was access. You know, they would start down a road and there would be trees down. Trees could fall behind them. I mean, there were firefighters that got trapped for a time by those effects of the storm coming through.
Well, as Ryan said, about 48 hours before the storm came through, we quickly shifted gears to more of a wind event. We did have significant resources at our office from around the state for water rescue. We were able to turn those back, send those back, and start acquiring heavy equipment. We had over 14 skid steers that we were able to rent very quickly, along with generators and other equipment. We also mobilized state assets, National Guard, forestry assets, their chainsaw crews, and heavy debris removal crews once we realized that we were getting more into a debris and wind event. But you're exactly right. Access was very limited for quite a while. We had people trapped in cars, people trapped in houses. We did have some fatalities, unfortunately, and those some of those took an extended period of time to be able to effect rescues on.
What was the first reactions that you both had? Obviously, I guess my first question would be, where were you when the storm was going on? Obviously at your centers, I would think, but at the same time, once the storm passed, you could get out there and look around. Just what were some of your reactions to what you saw?
Well, the night before, I had visited some of our staging areas we had set up, both in the Greenville and Spartanburg areas, to make sure that everything was flowing. And then as the storm passed very early on Friday morning, as soon as the sun came out and we felt it might be safe to do so, you got out there to see what it was that we were going to deal with. And even just in the downtown and surrounding areas of Greenville, I knew very quickly that this was not an ordinary storm that we were going to be dealing with.
Doug, what were your first thoughts when you got a chance to survey all of this?
Well, we had all spent the night in our Emergency Operations Center, which is basically across the street there on Fair Forest Road. Shock. We heard the winds. It just continued. That was the main thing that sticks in our mind, is just the intensity of the wind and lasting for so long. You know, most storms just blow through pretty quick, but this lasted for hours and hours and hours. At that point, we began communicating with our first responders out in the field, whether it be fire, police, EMS, also our state, county, and city public works and roads departments, trying to get a snapshot very quickly of what was going on. And it was at that point, well into Friday morning, that we realized that we were up against a monumental task.
Can you both give me an idea now, maybe some of the raw numbers, if you still can recall them, about just how big a job that you faced, basically starting, I guess it would have been Friday afternoon, once the most dangerous part had left, outside of the fact that you still had trees that could come down and that kind of thing?
Well, we immediately knew, based on our technical data and outage reporting, that almost every customer that Duke Energy has in the upstate was without power, 99% of them across the board, and that we were going to have a significant challenge in getting the resources we needed in a timely fashion to the places where we knew the damage was. But as we started to get more intelligence from the field, more reconnaissance, we understood that Western North Carolina had taken a pretty big hit too after it came through. Greenwood County was right there at the tip of the spear of the storm, and so we had damage across a very vast area that we're not we typically don't see with that type of storm or any type of storm that comes through the upstate. So we had to regroup real fast. We had to get our folks together to understand what the situation was. What can we bring to bear to help it? We reached out to our community partners immediately, and whether state, county, and city level, to make sure we understood what their needs were too, and what we could do to help them, and what they could do to help us, so that we could get restorations occurring as quickly, as safely as possible.
Doug, we showed some video just moments ago of just the massive numbers of ginormous trucks that came here to clear debris. How much debris had to be cleared or was eventually cleared across the county?
It was upwards of 2 million cubic yards, which we have never seen before. We get ice storms, we get debris from summertime storms. I think some of our largest debris events have been winter ice storms, but nothing even close to this. And that's when we began to really realize what we were up against. Between that and the sheer number of power outages, we began marshaling more resources into the county as we could get them into the county. At the end of the day, we handed out over 100,000 MREs and over 200,000 bottles of water. Even down to our individual efforts, our emergency operations center was without power for 3 weeks. It's a new facility. Unfortunately, we have a very large generator, and we were able to run off of generator power. But that just goes to show you that we weren't immune to these issues as well as our employees. They had houses that were damaged. They had families that were stranded without food as well. So this took on many facets, and psychologically, this was very tough on a lot of people.
And just to follow up on what Doug was talking about, the human impact there. The Duke Energy family was deeply impacted both in South Carolina and North Carolina. And, our teams wanted to get out there and do the job that they do so well every day. But they also had home concerns that they had to deal with as well. Their families were without power. Their families were dealing with trees on roofs and those sorts of things. And so those days right after the event took place were a real challenge for everybody. But it was really, I'm trying to find the right word. It was just gratifying to see how communities came together in those days afterward and help each other out to get through what was really a historic natural disaster.
I was going to use the word heroic, and I don't think it's overstating that, because imagine the job that both of your organizations had to deal with at a time where workers had their very own issues. Again, power basically completely knocked out outside of generators. Are there any individual stories that you remember of just people that worked for you or worked with you that just really stood out about just what an incredible effort it was on their parts?
I'll just say that, in the days after the storm, I would visit our folks in the field, our planners, our operations leadership, and even, the line workers who were out there. And to a person, if you've been with this company for any period of time, this was the most significant event that you had ever dealt with. We had folks who traveled to Katrina and travel even as far back as Hugo, and they had just never seen the amount of destruction and the widespread impact of it. And so wrapping your head around that from a human perspective is something that a lot of folks went through. And again, you had the human stories of families who were impacted, individuals who were impacted, and some of those still continue today.
Doug, I'm sure you've got some real heroes that you'll never forget what they went through.
Well, and we have a large program that's called CERT, Community Emergency Response Team. It's all volunteers. We have different components of that. But when this storm hit, we had over 100 volunteers within our CERT group that took time away from their own families and their own recovery efforts. They compiled over 3,000 hours during the initial phases of the storm, manning our shelters. We had 5 shelters open. We had first public shelter open in the state, and it was done solely with volunteers. We also had a special medical needs shelter that was run by medical personnel and volunteers at USC Upstate. We were the first in the state to have that opened. Those are very labor intensive. They're 24/7. We have to have meals. We have to have toiletry items, showers, all those kind of things for these people. And our CERT and volunteer program stepped up. And in my mind, those are all heroes.
And I got to add that I consider the community as a whole a hero through all of this, whether it was in Spartanburg, Greenville, Asheville, Anderson. We brought in a matter of days, 20,000 individuals who weren't from here to help us recover from this. And the community support that we got at staging sites in areas where we bed down folks across the upstate was so tremendous. We had schools sending cards and letters and folks dropping off food, and it was just very heartwarming, and it really helped those folks who came in, our neighbors, but also our folks who live here and work here every day.
We are talking with Doug Bryson and Ryan Mosier about Helene 1 year later on Fred the Show. We'll have much more in just a moment. Back now with Doug Bryson, Spartanburg County Emergency Services Director, Ryan Mosier from Duke Energy. Ryan, let me ask you, and it's not really fair for this event because this was so unprecedented, but just for people's knowledge, when it comes to a large power outage, whether it be caused by a storm or something like that, can you kind of explain the process that you have to go through to get service restored?
Yeah, and each event is slightly different, and the magnitudes are different. Obviously, Helene was, just a significant event, but on a normal basis, we have a process that we follow that tries to work the system as it's designed to bring the largest amount of customers back online as quickly and as safely as possible. You do that first, you got to make sure your power plants are running and that they're safe to operate. Then you have the large transmission structures, which during Helene took a significant beating like we had never seen before. More than 250 structures were damaged in some way, shape, or form. And these are the huge poles and wires that you see across the countryside. So we had to repair those because if those don't work, it doesn't matter what we do in your front yard, you're still not going to have power. And so we had to scout and repair all of that. And then you get to the substation level, same thing. You want to make sure all the transformers, all the electrical work is safe. And then finally, you start working those lines that feed from the substations to homes and businesses across the community.
You talked so much about the tremendous amount of preparations that both of your groups did. At the same time, is there any way to really, it was an impossible challenge to completely prepare for something like that. It's just, we've never seen a storm like that. And all of us hope we never see one again like that.
Well, the damage was significant for Helene, and it was historic. But one thing that Duke Energy is doing, and a lot of your utilities, your co-ops, and other organizations that do this work across the upstate are doing, is trying to make the right investments to make this grid stronger, to strengthen the infrastructure, to make it more resilient to storms, whether it's an ice storm or a significant hurricane that comes through the area. And so those are ongoing activities that we do every day. We're adding new technology to make things smart for the grid so it can make restorations quicker without necessarily needing manpower to do so. So these are things that we're looking at as we move through our everyday work to make sure that the grid is as strong as it can be.
Doug, is there any lessons that you take away from this storm? And hopefully lessons you'll never have to use again?
Right. There's always lessons learned from every event, even minor incidents that we have on a regular basis in the county. We do an after-action review of it, and we come up with lessons learned. And internally, communications technology, radio systems, bolstering those so when the power does go out, or we do in the first 24 hours of this storm, we lost our 911 center, and they had to relocate to our emergency operations center. So there's some redundancies built in there that we can always improve on. We're in the process right now of replenishing all of our supplies, all of our resources, our bottled water, our MREs, the things that we utilize the most during Helene. We have warehouses strategically placed around the county and stockpiles. So we're, tweaking those as needed based on what the community demand was during Helene. But again, the internal communications technology is always an issue. We always have to find better ways to do things. And like I said, without the power for as long as it was off, that brought a lot of things to our attention that we are correcting.
Doug, I think that you've got a few million cubic yards of Lake Lure that are now in the Enoree area, that's been one of the places to take them. Let's talk a little bit, mainly specifically with Ryan, about Western North Carolina. There are some areas that it looks normal, but if you've gone to Chimney Rock and especially Bat Cave, it's going to be a years-long process. Where is Duke Energy on getting everything? They've got power, but getting things back to what you would consider to be a normal situation.
Well, first and foremost, the Asheville community, the surrounding towns and the mountains are very important to Duke Energy, and we've served those customers up there for more than a century. It's, there's a unique lifestyle in that part of the world, and when we saw what happened in the days after Helene, it really was devastating to a lot of folks who really have visited and have friends and family up there, or have teammates who work up there. We learned really quick that the significant impact of the flooding and the damage was going to affect this community for a very long time. So we wanted to be deliberate after we get through the power restoration phase, which we did fairly quickly, considering the amount of damage. But we still have work going on. We just removed a mobile substation that we set up to support Biltmore Village just a few months ago. And so we're continuing construction where things were literally wiped off the face of the earth, and making sure that when we rebuild, we're rebuilding stronger than we were before. We had started that before in some areas. There's a famous photograph, so to speak, floating around where a box truck was wrapped around a steel pole in the area of Biltmore. And those are transmission poles that we installed within the last few years. So They proved their worth, and now we use those types of experiences, that type of real-time feedback from the storm to inform our decisions moving forward.
Doug, you mentioned this a little bit earlier. Can you break down what work and cleanup still needs to be done in Spartanburg County? I think just because we don't see the pile of limbs on the side of a road, I think it makes it escape our memory very quickly that there's still a lot of areas that are dealing with issues.
Yeah, there is, and there's legal ramifications that come in as far as when we can go on private property and things like that. So that's why we're working with a lot of our volunteer groups and community partners that can help these people that still have debris in their maybe in their backyard or side yards. Our Public Works and Roads and Bridges have been working nonstop with we have a contract for a debris removal contractor. They've been grinding up the mulch and transferring it to various landfills around the upstate, just trying to move it out. I know I see the trucks from Western North Carolina on I-26 every day. I believe they're going to Lawrence and Union counties, the landfills, just trying to move the mulch and the debris out of the area. But the grinding process has been lengthy. All that debris has to be ground up into mulch. There's health and safety requirements and procedures that have to be followed by state regulatory agencies. So a lot just comes into that. And we're just trying to help the community continue to recover as best we can.
In our closing minutes here, let me ask you both about what people should be thinking about as far as preparing for hopefully something that never comes like this again.
Well,
You push this on people to be ready in this event, and now we've all experienced it. Ryan, you've got some ideas?
Yeah, so the one thing that we always want to communicate with our customers is that preparedness message. It's never too early to start to be ready for the next storm or the next event that's going to impact you, whether that's a winter storm, an ice storm, a tornado that could come through, or some other situation that Mother Nature can surprise us with. And so we always encourage folks, take the opportunity, take the anniversary, while you're thinking about storm and there's not one knocking on our door, to go through your plans, to think about what supplies you need on hand, and to make sure that you and your family are prepared the next time that an event like this impacts us.
Doug, would you have some similar thoughts for people it's one thing to say be prepared, but this was a case where you needed to be, and not just to rush to the grocery store, 10 minutes before it comes.
Right, absolutely. It's many points of preparedness that we stress, and I think this really drives home those efforts that we have all done, even from the State Emergency Management Division with their hurricane warnings for the coastal areas all the way up to here. And I think that was a big problem, and a big problem that we all faced was people thought, well, we're in the upstate, we're immune to this. We've got tropical storms before, we've had some minor impacts, but nothing prepared anybody for what we saw. And hopefully people will take our warnings seriously now, have several days worth of non-perishable food, have water, have another issue we ran into was fuel, gasoline. So many gas stations were out, and some that were on generators for our first responders. We also have generators on our fuel stations and filling points for county vehicles and emergency services vehicles, and just to take these warnings seriously. We don't like to cry wolf. We sent out over 40 emergency messages, both on social media and through cell phones, and the federal, what's called WIA, Wireless Emergency Alerting, and IPAWS, to notify the community before, during, and after the storm. And we take those messages seriously. We take them to heart. We don't send them out unless we mean them. And we just ask everybody to please pay attention and follow the instructions, because it's disheartening to us that we lost as many lives as we did in Spartanburg County. Now, you can't always prevent those, but, we all preach and preach and preach, turn around, don't drown. And several of our fatalities were still people driving through flooded areas and flooded streets and got swept away. So that's very hard on us as emergency services people, because we are in the public stressing those points all the time, but yet people still insist on these dangerous behaviors, and we lose lives because of it.
And the other critical piece about preparedness is something that customers don't see, residents don't see necessarily. It's the everyday communication and partnership that we have with the organizations that do this work, from emergency management, the municipal organizations, the county organizations, the state organizations. We talk throughout the course of the year. We are working together to understand the needs and the processes of our partner agencies like Spartanburg County. And so it's critical that we continue to do that. We continue to keep those conversations going and understanding their needs. They understand our needs. That way we can all respond as one when these incidents occur.
Doug Bryson, Ryan Mosier, thank you for your advice. Also, thank you for perspective on what we all dealt with a year ago. We appreciate you being here.
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you.
All right, that's Fred the Show for this week. Join us every week right here on WSPA+.